Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Hope you're doing well, guys. Today I'm going to make a video about myself, as if that wasn't always the case. Um, I just I was wondering about what to make a video about, and I was thinking that perhaps one of the things that I talked about it in the past, but I have not maybe delved into it that much, is the huge variety of maybe not huge variety, but certain variety of types that people have ascribed to me. Because even though I identify as an INFJ, and I'm pretty sure that this is like the closest type to me, and I would say that by and large I'm impressed by how many people just agree on this channel that I'm probably an INFJ, and the forum infjs.com that I'm a member of. I think most people would see me as an INFJ as well, and I'm in a way I'm surprised because, first of all, because I don't necessarily think myself that I always come across as an INFJ, and maybe second of all because it is quite common, as you already know, especially INFJs out there who make videos, that it is one of the first things that an INFJ making videos online experiences, their type being questioned. That happens because, we could further subdivide this into two reasons. The first reason is people love people love controversy, and they love gossip, and they love imagining that they are being cheated. But sometimes that's really what happens too, so it's complicated. And the second subsection for a reason is that given that an INFJ type is so rare, people are naturally going to approach a new person, talking about their INFJness with, maybe not with suspicion, but waiting to be convinced to some extent. Just maybe more so than if it were, I'm just going to say it randomly, maybe if it were an ENFP, for example, that were making videos, simply because ENFPs are more common. And if we're talking about all the sensors, maybe even less suspicion would arise. INFJs are rare. INFJ males are essentially, I think, from what I hear, INFJ males are the rarest. I talked about this before. It's never something that I measured. It's something that I've heard. It's something that I have encountered many times. Something that seems to be true, at least empirically for me, because I don't think I've ever met an INFJ man. Oh, I've met one INFJ guy in my entire life. Got on with him really well, but I only met him a few times. Then he had to leave the country where I was at the time. So just one, at least in the period during which I was aware of what I was, aware of MBTI sort of frameworks. Maybe there were male INFJs that I met in the past whose INFJness skipped by me because I wasn't thinking in those terms at the time, or I wasn't crazy yet, So these are various reasons why, INFJ males being so rare, it's you can kind of understand why their INFJness is questioned. Another main reason that could be adduced is that INFJs are, by definition, people who can, because of NIFE, they can easily sort of, at least superficially, embrace other personalities because they have a capacity for adaptation. So they are kind of chameleons in some respects. They're not actors, but they're not actors in the sense that they pretend to be someone. They're like existential actors in the sense that their very existence, the way in which they manifest their existence, is by some sort of acting. But again, not in a pejorative sense, more in the sense that they can embrace many personalities in some way by adapting themselves all the time. And that can lead perhaps to some confusion as well. Although precisely there being something like that in an INFJ's personality could be an indication that the person is an INFJ. In any case, I've seen that online. I follow some INFJ channels, and it's rare that an INFJ person, let's say an INFJ YouTube person's type, is not questions. And when I say questions, I don't necessarily mean that the questioning has to be aggressive or has to be hostile. Sometimes people, in fact, even most of the people who express their opinion on my type, when they don't think I'm an INFJ, they express it pretty peacefully. It's never meant to be offensive. It's just their honest opinion, and I appreciate it. And often I ask for their reasons for thinking that, because I always remain open to possibilities of me being another type. There are certainly behaviors of mine where sometimes I behave a certain way, and I ask myself, is that really an FE thing to do, or is that really is that not any? Often FI and any seem to be present in my life to an extent that is almost surprising. But nevertheless, before I go into that, so I was asking myself these questions, and that kind of came back to my mind because someone in a recent video, I forget the name of the person now, but said that I seemed like an ENFP based on my based on like a video that I made of myself walking like in Ireland. And I have actually asked the person to provide some explanation if they can about why. So that's like, I think that's, I don't necessarily want to talk about this particular comment, because in fact I actually don't get that many comments like these compared to maybe people like Frank James or Pukoki, who are, I think both of them sometimes seen as INFPs, as FI dominants. And Eric Thor is often seen as an INFP as well, or multiple other types, so regardless of what type these people are, I think most of them are actually INFJs, if not all. You never know. In my regards, I would say that maybe also because I have a bit less exposure than them, it's maybe I'm more preserved from like this critical eye. But I would say that for the most part, yeah, my type is not really a matter of discussion that often, but of course it recurs sometimes. And when it does recur, it intersects. The recurrence of these very occasional and sporadic comments intersects with something that is deeper ingrained in me, which is this strange sort of dwelling together of a conviction that I am an INFJ, and I'm very comfortable with that. To the extent that it's almost like a matter of course for me now. Like I've just been used to the idea, and it just seems so clear to me that I don't even necessarily, talk from the point of view of an explicit INFJ like place, because it's just integrated into how I perceive myself. So that dwelling next to some moments where I'm like, okay, like that was the least INFJ thing ever, and at least, INFJ thing that we hear is not an INFJ thing to do. And I just did it, and it's fine, and my life seems fine, and I don't seem to be particularly unhealthy or stressed, or am I? Perhaps I am, and I don't realize that, because an INFJ uses FE, which means that their awareness of their emotional internal state is going to be less immediately acute than it would be for an FI user. But nevertheless, after this long introduction, what are the types that either people tell me, sometimes jokingly with a grain of truth in it, potentially, sometimes seriously, sometimes it's myself who wonders about these types. What are these types that people tell me I might be those types, or I think I might be those types, or at least I would say maybe perhaps more truthfully, I sometimes fleetingly embrace the possibility of being those types without actually ever not returning to the reality of being an INFJ. So I think that, I've discussed this topic before, but I thought maybe another video on the topic would be interesting, especially since at this stage, like I said, I do not really have this I do not really take, I don't know, maybe this is going to sound a bit strange, I'm not sure, but I did not really take the whole like being an INFJ thing as seriously as I originally did, because I think when I originally did, I very quickly made it a very intimate part of my identity. But because it was a new thing, like I felt that for a while it was still a fragile part of my identity that I had to protect. Whereas now it's something that I'm like I said, I'm so used to it that someone, if someone were to say and does say like that I could be another type, I wouldn't be shaken by that. Sometimes I'd even be like, oh yeah, perhaps, because that's a way of remaining interested in like MBTIs. We keep thinking, oh, what if I were that type? You do that without really believing it, but it's kind of fun, and you kind of it could be also a way of seeing how like other types influence you, or maybe people of certain types in your family might have influenced you from a functional perspective. And so, in my case, I would say that it's almost never that I'm seen as a sensing type, maybe except in the case of people who really, really don't know me well, and to whom I come across as like an ISFJ or something like that. But maybe they've met me for 5 minutes and they just seen the FE side of me, But from the moments that they kind of interact with me more, they realize that I have, very little in the way of practical intelligence, and I'm a very abstract kind of thinker. And so I don't think that sort of sensor side interpretation needs to be dwelt upon for too long in my case. Now, in the case of the N types, it's quite different, because there's been a lot of different versions of different people, telling me about this or that type potentially fitting me. Now, in the video during which I was walking to the shop, I talked about how Irish people perceived me, and how I was looking at the dichotomous at the dichotomous tests or way of accessing one's type, and how I arrived at it through discussing with my Irish friends to INFJ via, having to really nail down whether I was really an extrovert or an introvert, and a thinker or a feeler, and even a judge or a perceiver. But if we consider now something a bit more profound, a bit more deep, and just look at the functions, I'd say definitely that like the two functions that I said that about 10 minutes ago now, but the two functions I seem to manifest sometimes that get me wondering are NE and FI. I think NE, just because I have this free associative intuition, I think a lot more than people realize. I said before, I think in writing it's more obvious that I'm an NI user. In talking, sometimes in conversation, I can really come across as if I'm jumping off from topic to topic, and that sometimes I feel like when I don't do it is because I rein myself in. I mean, I'm not sure about that. There are definitely people with whom it works a lot better, and it turns out that I never use any better than when I'm like talking to an NE-DOM, whether it be an ENFP or ENTP. So that could actually be a sign that I'm an INFJ, because I think that an INFJ interacting with an NE-DOM often it goes in the direction of NE-domness rather than NI-domness when an interaction with an ENFP or an ENTP takes place. At least it looks that way, but that's definitely something that can happen. For the FI side of things, I would say that it's just that like some people have said in the past, and even some somewhat recent past, that I could be somewhat unflinching in some of my moral positions, some of my judgments, and that I could seem like maybe not ruthless, but sort of unbending, almost like INTJ style. Now, I think that I can come across in that way, when it comes to the decisions I make, very unflinching, very stubborn. I do think that it appears, maybe it's a superficial thing, but it does appear in person, like, when I make videos, that I don't really have much of the INTJ in me. But again, it's something that I've heard, especially in writing, often. Because when I'm in forums, I tend to write relatively short messages, and they're quite to the point, quite direct, let's say. I have a strong personality, so maybe that comes across. So any dominance, ENFP, ENTP are things I hear. People who see my FE tend to, and my TI, because I think I have strong enough TI, sometimes might be tempted to think that I'm more of an ENTP type, because when I interact with people and come across quite extroverted. ENFP, I don't really know why. I don't really know why people who say that I'm an ENFP or think I'm an ENFP don't just go straight for ENTP just because of my TI, which is visible, I think, if you know TI. I think it actually is pretty safe to say that it's visible in almost all my videos. But I think it could just be because ENFPs are, in some sense, like a bit softer than ENTPs. They're not as direct, or sort of they're not as acerbic, I guess I want to say, as ENTPs can be. Like if you're talking to an ENTP, there's always going to be a moment when they just say something and you're like, wow, okay. And maybe I don't really do that as much, except when I'm really angry. So that could be the reason. So ENTP, ENFP, INTJ. There used to be a time when I was seen as an INTP, but I don't think that has really been the case for a long time. I think that maybe when I was younger, I was a bit more introverted. My TI was quite prominent, and I was quite shy, and I don't know. I think it was maybe a case of my F function not being as developed at the time. But it also, like, if you read my notebook, my philosophical notebook, I think, and if you don't see the NI, which I think is quite obvious, but NI is always a difficult function to pinpoint. If you don't see it, you might think, okay, like, there's so much TI, that's the writings of an INTP, and no extroverts in his right mind would spend time writing this, but yeah, INTP, I would say these days that's not the trends for my possible other type, is not towards INTP. It seems to be more toward, in writing, INTJ, and in speaking, like when I'm here, ENFP or ENTP. Small trends. I think that the main trend remains INFJ. I have not mentioned ENFJ or INFP because I'm almost never associated with either. I just think that it's quite clear I'm not an F dominant, I'm not an FE dominant, because it's obvious, I think. There's no need to go into why. And in terms of at FI dominance, I think it's just the TI or the T function that is developed. Maybe a case could be made that I'm actually not using TI but TE. I don't think that's the case, but you never know. But T being my inferior function, I doubt it. So that's from my perspective. If you have any perspective on my type and on your type and how you're seen by others, please share. Let's have a chat, and I'll see you soon, guys. Ciao.